Michigan State head coach Mel Tucker was suspended without pay on Sunday. He is the subject of a Title IX investigation after multiple reports detailed accusations against him of sexual harassment. Defensive backs coach Harlon Barnett is the acting head coach moving forward. For a look into the program now, Stephen Brooks of Spartan Tailgate joins us. And Stephen, you've reported that Barnett has started meeting with players and plans to do the same with staff members now. So how has he summarize the feelings of those in the program at the moment, and what are you hearing on the overall state of this team?
I started hearing it immediately on Sunday when the news broke, and it was doubled down on Monday from people near the program and inside the building that the vibe from the players was better than you would expect. Obviously this is a lot to process for these kids. Completely blindsided, basically all of them in that building. So, but the vibe coming into this weekend's game against Washington, that's going to get you focused, right? And for all intents and purposes, Michigan State's season really starts this Saturday. With all due respect to Central Michigan and Richmond, this was always going to be the first real opportunity that we got to see what this team's actually all about. So I started hearing pretty early on that the vibes were more upbeat than you would think. There's a connectedness, a unity, sort of a us against them type of mentality that can be forged in situations like these. But then Harlon Barnett had his first press conference, and I think he evoked a lot of that same mentality and emotion of just sort of, rallying the troops, circling the wagons, and everyone being on the same page to just make the best of this. Nobody wants to be in this situation, of course, but, there's still 10 games left to play. And these kids, whatever their goals are for next year, whether it's here, somewhere else, the NFL, they all still need good tape. These coaches, can't throw in the towel. So there's a lot still to play for, and everyone's just really kind of rallying behind each other.
Stephen, Harlon Barnett, he's had a long history in East Lansing. He played there. He also worked for Mark D'Antonio before in his previous stint. What can you tell us a little bit about Harlon Barnett, the recruiter?
Yeah, I think he's kind of an old school guy. I don't think he's going to show up with the flashy watch and the Jordans or anything like that, or, any sort of, hashtags, anything like that. He's not very active on social media, but he's a very engaging guy. He's a very disarming guy. That when you sit down and have a conversation with him, you kind of feel like you've known him for a little bit. He doesn't feel like he's this big-time football coach necessarily. He just seems like he could be your neighbor, or somebody you work with or whatever. So he's a guy that I think is going to play hard on his experience. He's played for and Nick Saban and Bill Belichick in the NFL. And he's been where these guys want to go, right? He's been in the Michigan State standout. He was drafted into the NFL. And now, he's been very successful as a coach. I think he can point to a track record of development that I think is pretty appealing for folks. The top of his resume are two guys, Darqueze Dennard and Trey Waynes, who are nobody recruits. Trey Waynes was a 2-star out of Wisconsin, and Darqueze Dennard was I think only had one offer from Middle Tennessee coming out of Georgia way back when. He turned both of them into first-round picks. So he's got a track record of development. There's others too, overlooked DBs that he developed and turned into NFL players. So he's got a track record of make you guys better than what they arrive as. And I think that's something that will play a lot. Now, can he sell the entire program? Can he recruit receivers and quarterbacks and running backs, all those things? We're going to find out, I guess. But he does have a track record of development, and he knows the place very, very well. So he can speak from the heart about what you're getting from the Michigan State experience.
From a recruiting standpoint, Michigan State's 2024 class is just inside the top 50. Only 13 commits. 2 of them are ranked inside the top 24/7. That's led by 4-star wide receiver Nick Marsh. But Stephen, when it comes to objectives on the trail, is the staff just trying to retain the commitments they already have, or are they still actively trying to bring prospects on board?
I'd say right now, even as we speak, guys, that's still kind of being hammered out in a certain way. This, as you can imagine, is really throwing the recruiting department, into chaos in some ways. But yeah, I think priority one, I heard Monday, Tuesday, things were just kind of at an overall halt. And beginning, Wednesday, as we move through the rest of the week, that it was more about, okay, let's move forward with a bit of a plan here. Harlon Barnett said he'd be reaching out individually to all their commits. The position coaches already did that, I believe, on Sunday right away. But I think retention has to be the top priority right now, because who's going to jump into the boat, for a program with no real clear direction right now? There's just, what are you committing to if you were to commit to Michigan State right now? So things have been slow. They got one commit last weekend, flipped a linebacker from Toledo and in-state kid, Jaden Walker. And before that, their last commit was Nick Marshall, you mentioned, in late July. So they haven't been super hot on the trail necessarily. And I think at this point, you have to focus on keeping the guys you have, because trying to bring anybody else into the class is just going to be a really, really hard sell. And it remains to be seen how many of these guys are going to stick around, because they've been committed for a while. And, the picture they committed to is the picture's changed on them now. So I think retention has to be the top of the list. And communicating with 2025s, 2026s, those type of things can still move forward, because we're sort of selling the university as a whole, some of their resources, some of their facilities, infrastructure, that stuff. I know they're still going to hammer that, but 2024, I think you got to just circle the wagons and try to hold on to as many guys as you can.
Stephen, on the topic of roster retention, Michigan State's kind of in this ominous place right now, because if Mel Tucker does depart Michigan State, that opens up a 30-day window in which the players on that roster then can enter the transfer portal and have immediate eligibility, meaning there's not going to be a strike against them if they do decide to transfer. So I wonder, what is the expectation there in terms of keeping those guys home, committed to Michigan State, and what do you expect from a roster turnover standpoint?
I think there's potential for a lot of attrition on this roster, quite honestly. The way Mel Tucker had been recruiting, as you guys know, he expanded the map. It wasn't just a Midwest 4-hour radius type of approach that this program had for a long time under Mark D'Antonio. He was getting kids from California, Louisiana, Georgia, Texas, Florida. So these guys have no sort of regional ties here, in a lot of respects. I think there's a good chance that a good piece of sort of let's say the top third, maybe the middle third as well on this roster, is prone to be moving on. Whether they get straight up poached by another team and say, hey, here's what we can offer you, or they just want to move closer to home because this isn't what they signed up for. They brought in 13 4-star kids these last two classes, the first real recruiting classes that Mel Tucker could do and put together that weren't over Zoom. So the talent level was increasing here. I think you look at a lot of those kids, first and second year players on the roster today, as prime candidates to probably not be here again, or just players that Michigan State's really going to have to fight to keep. Now, there's comfort here to a degree of knowing your surroundings, knowing scheme, but how long is that going to be in place, assuming that a new staff comes in. So I think there's potential for a pretty serious amount of movement coming out of this season, and it could really set the next step back depending on who goes.
Looking at this upcoming weekend, Michigan State hosts Washington in a marquee non-conference game. This was supposed to be one of their biggest recruiting weekends of the year. So how does the situation impact the upcoming weekend and potentially additional weekends in the future?
Yeah, my understanding is right now, they do have a certain guest list ready and prepared, for this weekend. I'm not sure if all those kids are still going to make it. I'm sure some might reverse course and say, okay, I'm going to go over here now. I think the priority would probably be much more of a narrower scope in terms of regionality and proximity. Get some in-state guys up here on campus that you can keep in the fold, that you sort of have a natural advantage with. But it's going to be hard to bring up those kids that they wanted from Florida, Texas, all over the South, wherever. Again, there's no clear direction. What is the future going to look like for this program? What are things going to look like in 3 months? Nobody can tell them that. So if I'm a recruit, I'm not wasting the gas money personally. I'm not wasting the airfare. Now, if I'm over in Detroit, and I'm a sophomore, freshman or something, sure, of course you should come over and hang out and check that out, or Ohio, things like that. I just think the visits will probably be more confined to kids who are close by, who may be a little bit more on the edge in terms of are they takes or not, or are they sure they'll be takes in the future versus, as you said, this was really going to be, you hope, a big showcase opportunity for the program. And now I think they're just going to have to try to scramble and make do with whatever they can get over here. And again, leaning toward maybe younger classes and folks that are closer to campus that they can get sort of easily, because I just think they're going to have a hard time reeling people in from far away for a program that's in transition right now.
Stephen Brooks with the latest on the Michigan State situation. Thank you so much for joining us. And as this situation develops, be sure you stay tuned to Spartan Tailgate for the latest updates on MSU football and recruiting.